There's a couple of foods that are really sneaky when it comes down to spiking your insulin. Okay, now spiking your insulin is not necessarily a terrible thing, right? I mean, in theory, spiking your insulin means your body is responding to glucose and doing what it's supposed to do. So I have mixed feelings on an insulin spike, right? Like if you are a healthy individual and you consume a bolus of carbohydrates, then an insulin spike is going to allow those carbohydrates to get into the right place. Where it becomes a problem is when we are consistently having these spikes in insulin, and it's really hard to know when you're having a spike in insulin when it's a sneaky food. So let's talk about these two ones that are very specific. Instant oatmeal, not regular oatmeal, and ramen noodles. Let's break it down. Today's video is brought to us by Thrive Market. There's a 25% off discount link for you to check them out. You've probably heard me give this spiel before, but let me tell you, if you haven't, you have to check them out. Whatever kind of diet you're doing, they are a grocery store that is tailored to that. And they're not just some fly-by-night company. Like, they're big. People really use them. I've been using them for a number of years. And what you can do is when you log on, you can select what kind of diet you're doing and then filter your shopping by that diet. So that way you can categorize by different kind of macronutrients. It's really revolutionary. I don't know why people didn't think of it 10 years ago, but Thrive Market is awesome. So that link below will save you 25% off your entire first grocery order, plus get you a free gift. So use that link down below after this video. So to understand why instant oatmeal and why ramen noodles can be so sneaky, we have to understand what happens with starch chains. So starch chains, or starch molecules, are balls or strands of glucose that are bound together. And then what happens is when we eat them, hydrochloric acid starts to break things down, then it goes into the small intestine and it breaks down more and it kind of assimilates, and we have different enzymes like amylase, things like that, that break down starches into polysaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, ultimately leading to us being able to have glucose. So normally a starch molecule takes a while to break down. So in the situation of, say, oatmeal, oatmeal's not the highest glycemic cereal. It's not terrible. I have my own vices with oatmeal, but generally speaking, like if someone is making a lifestyle change, I'm not gonna dissuade them from oatmeal. I think that the soluble fiber content of oatmeal, the beta glucans from oatmeal are really good. Where we run into an issue is with instant oatmeal. You see, what they do with instant oatmeal is a lot of times it's either heated ahead of time and then sort of dehydrated. So what happens is the starch molecules have already been expanded and the glucose is already kind of freed up a little bit. So then when you heat that oatmeal, you're adding hot water to it and you're just bringing to life glucose molecules that are already evacuated from their starch ball. So that means you have a very high glycemic response. So in the case of oatmeal, regular oatmeal that is not instant oatmeal is like a 50-ish on the glycemic index scale, which is not low, but it's certainly not high. And then you factor in the fiber, that might slow things down. You know, whatever, you add a little bit of fruit to it, it might slow it down even more. It's not the worst thing in the world for sure. Instant oatmeal is more like an 83, 85. And that's without even talking about the sugar and the fruit things that are added into it. I say fruit things because sometimes it's not even fruit. It's like a weird dried fruit thing, like the peaches and cream, like the little, like square, like they look like chiclets that someone dropped in like my children's Play-Doh. Like, I don't understand. But either way, the point is that it's not going to be nearly the same as it would be with regular oatmeal. So I'll give you a suggestion here. With regular oatmeal, get regular like stone ground or steel cut oats, preferably ones that are sprouted. And then with that, when you cook them, let them cool a little bit. Now, if you want to go all the way and be kind of a health nerdy freak like me, you can literally let them get cold. Cold oats are going to be a resistant starch that don't break down as much. That's just a fun fact. Otherwise, just let them cool a little bit. That's a better option. The ramen noodles, this is where things are really interesting though. Low calorie. Totally. Like a ramen noodle thing, like you're talking a couple hundred calories at the most and it fills you up. The problem is it's sneaky, okay? Because the same kind of thing applies. Those noodles, when you put them in boiling water, what happens is in this case, the starch molecules swell up in the boiling water and then they burst. And when they burst, all the glucose molecules go out. So now you have pure high glycemic carbohydrates again. Even the broth can have a lot of the glucose molecules in it being relatively high glycemic. So I'm not saying that it's going to make you insulin resistant. I'm not saying that it's going to completely derail your fat loss goals, but I am suggesting that if you are trying to keep insulin levels in check, it's something that is sneaky that you wouldn't think is sneaky because you're like, oh, noodles, it's starches, it's going to take a while to break down. It's different because you're putting them in really high heat. In fact, there's a study that was published in the journal Nutrients that took a look at over 10,000, like 10,700 and something Koreans, and it was looking at their diet and it said, okay, if subjects were consuming 2 servings of instant noodles per week, there was a significantly increased risk of metabolic syndrome. Now, metabolic syndrome is characterized by a few things, but namely insulin resistance, being hypertensive, ultimately like mitochondrial dysfunction, just inability to process fuels properly. So that's correlation, doesn't equal causation, but it further justifies what we're talking about here. Now, I will say in this particular case, they noticed this mainly in women, not in men. Now, that I don't really have an answer for. I could speculate on some things, but it all depends on lifestyle and different regions of the world. Like maybe the men were more active than the women, so they were able to utilize glucose better. Who knows? I would completely be speculating. If someone knows Korean culture really well, then maybe you have a theory. You can put it in the comment section below. The bottom line is that there is some kind of a link there. So what's the solution with ramen noodles? With ramen noodles, what I would suggest doing, I know it's not going to replace the taste and the texture of real ramen noodles or even, Vietnamese pho, which is still going to have a similar issue with the starch from the rice noodles. But there's this thing called glucomannan fiber or konjac root noodles, also known as shirataki noodles. I would recommend trying to use that along with the same kind of broth you would normally use. So if you like top ramen or something like that, although I don't recommend all the weird stuff that's in the seasoning packets, if you like the flavor of the packets, take the packet, make some broth with it, and then put the konjac root noodles, the shirataki miracle noodles in it. That way it's just a pure glucomannan fiber that doesn't have the high glycemic response. In fact, it's a fiber that, if anything, is going to have a positive glycemic response on you. So that's just a little tip that you can try. So ditch the instant oats, go for regular oats and just cook them the old-fashioned way, and try to revamp your ramen lifestyle a little bit if you're watching that insulin resistance level. As always, keep it locked in here on my channel. I'll see you tomorrow.